So on the motion, this is where Psych OG comes in to the debate, right? So today's debate is not about whether other governments are better formed or not, right? Today's debate is about why the narrative of liberal democracies being the most desirable is regressive, which means we need to prove harms that exist for the narrative of liberal democracy, and if we can prove those harms, we can take today's debate, right? So, what harms am I going to prove, right? I'm going to prove firstly the intrinsic harm of liberal democracies and how it's not exactly the best form of governmentation. And secondly, I'm going to prove to you how it harms democracy as a whole, right? Now, before that, right, so let's just set a bit context, right, just in case it happens, right? Because when we talk about democracy or liberal democracy in this sense, right, it is not just only one form of democracy that exists. There are alternate forms. For example, the Republicans in America themselves are conservative democratic people, right? Democracies that we are talking about today are probably the left wing within the American Parliament, right? The liberals, Democrats, right? So these are the individuals that we are talking about, the liberal democratic people, and why is it bad compared to like maybe there are alternatives such as the moderates or the conservatives, right? So, right, we're also not advocating for authoritarian government here, just in case anyone comes out and says, no, OG is trying to say authoritarian is good. That is not what's happening in the debate today. So, what does the narrative mean? Yeah, sure.
Liberal democracy means governments who operate based on classic liberalism, means they believe in separation of powers, private markets, and some level of government control. So you have to defend.
Okay, so I'll give you a few specific contexts, right? They argue on those specific forms. Doesn't mean that the right way. Democracy, you have to defend authoritarian, right? That is unlikely true, right? And I'm going to go into the specific of why liberal democracy is specifically different here, right? Because so why liberal democracy is bad, right? Because when you talk about the left wing in America, right, the first thing that always comes to mind is probably the LGBTQ movement, right? They advocate for the rights of these individuals, right? But what does it mean to advocate for the rights of these people? It means that you will always call out people within your own parliament or within your own party that they are not good enough. You're not left-wing enough. You're not liberal enough. I'll give you an example. Recently, Kevin Hart was supposed to host the Grammys, right? But then they went, like people sit down, they went through time, like through his Twitter account to right, which harmed his ability to express himself as a liberal, right? We can see that current day Kevin Hart is not a homophobe or bigot that people are trying to paint him as. We can see him as a moderate individual who respects the rights of LGBTQ people. But the problem with liberal democracy is they always try to one-up one another. They always try to be the purest form of like, I'm a liberal, I'm the most special snowflake here, I do not harm anyone because I am the most left-wing centric individual here, right? When you have that mindset, what do? You disallow, no thank you, you disallow individuals to express their own thoughts, right? Because in a liberal democracy, you try to protect everyone, right? So these people's ability to express themselves. You harm the fundamental right to freedom, a freedom of opinion and a freedom of expression, right? Because sometimes this statement is not hate speech, right? Which is debatable whether hate speech should be allowed or should not be allowed, right? Because hate speech can benefit an individual because it is a critique or something like that, right? But in a liberal democracy, you do not allow anything if someone says that hurts me, right? That hurts me, and you limit the expressions of individuals. And when you do limit the expression of individuals, you are harming the fundamental right that exists, right? But this does not happen within the conservative. This does not happen within the conservative democratic government, right? Because you allow for people to critique each other within there, and people are not calling out whatever, and people are saying, don't say that, you're hurting me. So I need to be as PC as possible to not hurt anyone. But in the conservative democracy, they allow for criticism to exist within them. Like even with America itself and most of their hate within the Republican Party, every time when people argue point out their flaws, they will try to explain or whatnot, and they welcome some sort of criticism. That does not happen in the liberal party and whatnot, right? So. Right. So the idea here is who's to decide what can be said or what cannot be said within the parliament itself. Is it the government, right? Does the government have the ability to hinge upon right of people's freedom of expression, right? Now the second harm to that will happen is because when this narrative becomes the most desirable, what does this mean, right? This means that people will reject other forms of democracy. People do not want to hear because they say this is the most desirable, this is the one I akin to. I don't have to listen to any one of you because this is the best, right? They are not open for criticism, right? They will think that they are in the best position and they get to themselves, is this the right answer, right? They will be dismissive of anyone else. And why is this harmful in a democracy or harmful to a democracy, right? Because you allow for no compromisation, right? Because when you think that you have the best, and when you think conveniently that you are the most liberal, I know it's a bit hard to understand, but when somebody thinks this is the most desirable thing, this is the best thing available for me, it's very hard for me to think why do I care about you at all, right? Like there is no incentive for an individual to question his own fundamental thinking or his own thinking about whether is this good or not. And when the individual don't question it, they don't compromise it. They will be like, this is the best method available. I don't care what you think, but because this is the best method available, you are supposed to accept this method. They will try to impose their will upon everyone else without trying to be critical whether their method is true or not. And this happens under the narrative that liberal democracies is the most desirable within the status quo, right? So what have I told you today? I've told you two things, right? Firstly, I've told you why liberal democracy in itself has some intrinsic flaws that are hindering upon people's principles, right, of freedom and speech or whatnot. And secondly, I've told you how, when it becomes the majority narrative, it does harm democracy because you don't allow for compromisation. With that, proud to propose.
I thank the Prime Minister. Now let's call upon the Leader of Opposition.
Here.
So this debate is not about whether liberals are better or conservatives are better. It's not about the left wing versus the right wing. What this debate is about whether liberal democracies, which is based on classic liberalism, is a good structure in all circumstances or not. No, the opening government and closing government does not have to defend authoritarian governments, but they just have to bash democracies and maybe some examples of why maybe a monarchy in this situation is better. But just to be clear, opening government is on our side because they want a democracy where the right wing can operate. We also want that. We want people to choose whatever they want, and that's what this debate is about. However, for the sake of opening government, I will still pretend that their case is correct and still respond to them in the first portion of my speech. The second portion of my speech will be the correct debate that we should operate in. So, what are my responses to them? I think opening government, their case is just against big swing liberals who create a culture of snowflakes, right? I think there are a few responses to this. The first thing is that note that everyone being too PC is already something that has been in discussion in the realms of liberals. So a lot of individuals in liberal culture are able to recognize that maybe we are being too politically correct, maybe the ways in which we deal with conservative individuals who are homophobic, maybe we're being too aggressive. All these discussions can exist, and it's a self-regulating towards these flaws too, right? So if you notice, they aren't against liberals, they're against liberal idiots. They are also conservative idiots who aren't willing to budge, who aren't willing to give concessions, and are also very radical. So these are people like Jordan Peterson, who thinks he's very smart, he will delegitimize everyone. He's a conservative person too. So this isn't a flaw of liberal values, it's a flaw of just idiots who identify as liberals or idiots who identify as conservatives. So that happens on your side. I don't think you should defend this, you should move on from what the debate is. So what is this debate? And what do we from opening opposition stand for? So what is the liberal democracy? So we think that this is where a government is elected by its citizens solely through a democracy. the US bombing all these Saudi, like Middle Eastern countries in the sake of wanting you to have a liberal democracy. I'll take you soon. We just have to defend that a liberal democracy is good in all circumstances and as a framework of governance. Yeah.
So the debate is about preferring one system or the other. How do you make the system preferable if you're not going to compare, contrast, and try to spread it?
Oh, no. So the methods in which you spread it, you don't care how you do it. You don't have to defend that. Maybe you can do it in a nice way. You don't think America should do it that way. This debate is just about whether it's good or not. Okay. So my first argument, why democracy is the best form of governance. I think there's two levels towards this. The first level is that democracy is the most accessible form for individuals. That ignores all types of privileges that you have, whether you are rich or whether you are poor, and they allow you to have an equal vote for whatever policy that you want in this election. This means that this form of governance is the best form for individuals to be able to access and be able to have what they want to say, and people have to listen because the structure in which this works is that the people who want to be voted in have to listen towards people. There's going to be term limits, and you have to there's going to be a term where you need to have a re-election. That means that the power dynamic of democracies and liberal democracies is that you always have to appease people, and people have an equal say in these instances due to the structure of how democracy works. The comparative to other forms of governance is that it prioritizes whoever listens to the born in a patriarchal society as a woman, or if you're a Palestinian in Israel, you have no form of voice whatsoever. You can't even run to become a leader. This means that other forms besides democracy are very discriminatory in nature, and they rank the hierarchy of your importance in the society based on your race and based on your privilege. We do not want that. Sit down. The second thing that we have to say is that So the comparative that we have is that individuals are able to have things like they can lobby for legislative protection for minorities in these instances. So that means that it accommodates the most amount of individuals in a democratic. No, I'm not taking anymore. The second level that we have is the accountability. So note that the framework of how this government works is not only that you vote them in, but there are other structures to balance you out. So this means obviously there's really bad policies that help you stay in power, because there are other powers independent of you that can stop you from doing this. This means that you are more accountable for the things that you do, because even if you are a corrupt person, there are other structures to stop you. The comparative under your side is that you have very little to no structures to stop you whatsoever, and the people in power can reign free. The second thing I have to say is that we do admit that this isn't a perfect framework. So this means that if you are in a minority of circumstance in this place and you are dictated by the tyranny of majority, you might not have your say. The comparative is simple. The first thing that we have to say is that the comparative is that at least minorities are able to speak up in these circumstances. So the first thing is that a lot of times morals change in these places, and because you vote and you might lose, if your votes for LGBT or liberal So that's the comparative that you have to make. The last thing is that even if you can't get full policies, you can make compromises because you still have an equal voice. This looks like if you are a sexual minority, maybe you can't get right to marriage, but in a democracy, it's like easier to get protection from being abused, or so easier compromises can be made because you have a voice. Whereas in a world in which you cannot vote, there are no compromises for these minorities in the get-go. Democracy is the way to go. We win this debate.
I thank the leader of opposition, and now let's call upon the Deputy Prime Minister.
It is very unfair for OO to push the burden to OG to defend like the authoritarian government and assume that in our side of the world everyone will be silenced, because that's simply not the case. What we have voicing out your opinion, like what they are trying to claim. It means things such as, for example, in America, you have to always defend people that are pro-choices. You always have to say that religion doesn't have a place in the liberal democracy because you simply want to protect everyone. This means that if you are defending a liberal democracy, it means that it's always about the left-wing people that you need to care about. It means things such as, for example, yeah, like what I said before, you cannot defend your religious belief because you cannot be conservative at all, because you always have to defend the liberal values. It means that liberal democracy in and of itself is a form of government that is very hypocritical. Just because it works in America, people does not have any high amount of inequality, for example, any unequal political capital within each group, doesn't mean that it has to be one narrative that is upheld in the whole world itself. Because we need to realize that not every country is like America. You need to realize that in a world where we always find that liberal democracy is very desirable, it means that you close your doors to any other possibilities of governments, right? It means that even if the other form of government is more suitable for your country, it means that you always have to follow this model provided by America because you feel that this is the one of the most desirable form of government itself. And this in and of itself is a very bad narrative to follow. But also, right, it is also unfair to push us the burden to prove the harms in all other form of democracy, like for example moderate democracy, class-based democracy, and everything, because that is not our burden. We only need to prove to you the harm that is exclusive in liberal democracy and the one point overall. Because I think what all has been championing is that at least people will be able to voice out their opinion, they will not be offended, and etc. You need to realize that in your liberal democracy, the vulnerable people will always be shut down by these liberal people. Like for example, in Indonesia, the religious people are always being offended, and etc. by the liberal people, because they simply say, oh, if you're not supporting LGBT, then you should not even exist in our country. And this is particularly harmful because you're not teaching them to appreciate each other's opinion, but rather you make them hate each other because you send the narrative to people that the only correct narrative is liberal values. It hurts the religious people, it hurts the conservative people, and that's why we believe that liberal democracy should not be standard that is upheld in all countries. Because realize that if you want this to be the narrative that is most dominant, you have to defend liberal democracy in all forms of governments, in all forms of countries. Yes.
So I'm quite confused exactly. So you say you don't want liberal democracy because of this right-wing narratives. But then in US itself, Trump is a right-wing guy existing in a liberal democracy, spouting whatever nonsense he wants. Therefore, whatever goals you want are ready to achieve.
This debate is not only about US. We are not defending the liberal democracy itself. We are not defending how these countries should not apply liberal democracy itself. It is because our burden here is to prove to you why liberal democracy is exclusively bad if you make it a dominant narrative that every single country in this world should follow. But now, moving on to my first substantive points about the freedom of speech. I think it is regrettable that in the process of trying to protect people's freedom, it is often silencing the most. For example, how people should always be pro-choices. That even if you want to acknowledge the intersectionalism within your belief, for example, like even if you are a feminist but you also want to be a religious person, This simply cannot exist in a liberal democracy because there are certain standards that people set within the liberal democracy itself. Because the moment when this narrative is seen as the most desirable form of the government, right, the one-true model that all countries should follow, it means that all countries should apply this, while it might not be the most suitable for all countries itself. One example is, like, for example, Indonesia and Malaysia, where it is comprised of intersectionalism itself. When they see that liberal democracy is the most desirable form of the government, it means that the LGBT movement, for example, will always force their still make people be able to have their own representation in the government itself. But the moment when you take liberal democracy as the only single value, it means that you acknowledge that these liberal values that is set by the Western world should also be applicable in each and every single other nation that wants to apply this just because they see that this is the best form of democracy. It means that now these people will be able to, for example, undermine and even insult the religious people itself. Because now it means that since they are the correct form of the government, since the government is upholding the liberal democracy itself, they have the upper hand over these religious people. And I think this is a form of the tyranny of the minority itself, right? Because this is simply a backlash to the value of democracy itself. When you said that this is the most desirable form of the government, which means that if you support a liberal democracy, not everyone will be able to not everyone will be able to equally voice out their concerns. There will always be inequality in the capacity of the people to voice out their concern. My question is that then how are you ensuring that people will be able to live in harmony when you clearly explicitly say that any other values is not valid at all? Thanks.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister and now the Deputy Leader of Opposition to wrap up the opening half of the debate.
I think it's unfortunate that even DLO has explained what liberal democracy is. So, liberal democracy does not mean that the government or the people cannot have conservative values. So, liberal democracy is just the structure of governance, of how governments operate or how governments are elected. We think liberal democracy means that the government operates, how the way the structure of the governance works is based on classic liberalism, which believes in the separation of power between government and also the legislative, executive, and judiciary, which also believes in some form of private ownership and also some form of free market, which also believes in individuals' autonomy. For example, it describes human rights to individuals that are unconditional. That way, but we don't have to defend that. Second, we think that we need to hear what is the stance of government bench. We're not sure what are they defending because it seems like they are defending, it seems like they are bashing a liberal democracy, but I'm not sure what is the better alternative or what is in some situations that they claim are superior, what are these things. Second, I think the closing wanted us to defend this. They say that, oh, if we want to defend narrative, we also must defend the way of how we want to spread it. Because they want to push us that we will force liberal democracy upon others. But if it's true, then you also must have the stance of alternative, right? You must say what forms of governance are good, and you also must defend spreading those kinds. It's not We agree that liberal democracy is not perfect. Some people will probably be left out if you are the minority, and but we think on a scale, it's more likely for these people to have at least some form of representation and a voice for them to voice out their opinions. We think that's the comparison. So they must provide a comparison. What is the alternative world that they prefer to look like? And second, they say that liberal democracy sets standards of what people should follow. It's also something that's not part of the debate because there's like this is about left wing PC, which I don't know, but like some authoritarian states, which I'm not sure why is that better compared to outside when the standards are set by people. Thirdly, we say that even if in the worst case we have checks and balances to make sure that people's fundamental rights are not abused. For example, the separation of power, right? So in liberal democracy, we have things, for example, that act as guidance of how governments should operate. The governments cannot even reach. For example, the constitution, which is prescribed people's freedom of speech that are unconditional, freedom of movement, or freedom of not being detained, or freedom of assembly, all these things, which means that at the end of the day, even if the theory of majority really do become make sure they don't do anything. We think even if you have to defend the effects of the narrative, we think it's good, right? If people think that liberal democracy is a desirable form of governance, people are more likely to demand for it, which is good for people. They should fight for their own rights, and they should fight to get like representation. And we think it's also good, for example, the reason why narrative is good, that's why we have, for example, the UN Human Rights Charter, which ensures that act as guidelines of how governments should treat their people. Even if it's not legally binding, we sure, but governments who want to do well, they act in accordance to this kind of human rights human rights charter, which provide individuals basic rights that they should prescribe to everyone. So my argument, I will talk about how liberal democracy, because you need the buy-in of people. So when you pass policies, these policies are more likely to be successful compared to the top-down approach that they have. I'm not sure what is the alternative that they have in their world. Nabi probably will say, right? We think the reason why liberal democracy is a good thing because it's not based on top-down approach, it's more like bottom-up approach. So the reason why it's important is for you to pass successful economic policy reform or even social reform, you must get the you must get the perception that is backed by the will of people. That's why, for example, in Soviet Union era, the reason why the agricultural reforms failed because people simply don't buy in. People don't have the confidence that these policies. The people that this is to win the election by saying that I will stimulate the economy, and to get the buy-in of people is something that is important for you to ensure that economic reforms can happen, social reforms can happen in the future. That's why the Jordan Peterson, the reason why he's so prominent, because he defied Canadian law, which forces people to call other people by their gender pronouns. Because many people don't buy in this kind of top-down approach. People think that this kind of top-down approach are intrusive and are not democratic, and people have no say towards that. So the comparison is when we have the buy-in of people, the social reforms and economic reforms can work better, even if it might take longer time, even if it's supposed to through some referendum probably, or like some form of democracy to make sure that everything, like most people agree. In comparison, it's better than have no buy-in of the people, where at the end of the day, this
conclusive part of the debate. To continue to the closing part of the debate, and now let's call upon the member. Okay.
The problem with preference is that it not only comes with glorification, but it comes with settling. You settle because this is the potential best system that can happen. Despite all of its flaws, despite all of the things that could potentially be better, it could always be worse. This is the narrative that harms liberal democracies, and this is just the narrative that prevents us from just having better systems of governance. I think opening opposition is right to point out that opening government did not do a good job in this debate. Here's what opening government did. Firstly, they became the team of Kevin Hart, apparently, as the anti-SJW. Some Jordan Peterson came out. I'm sure that's valuable in a different debate. But the debate cannot be about authoritarianism versus liberalism. Similarly, in opening opposition, the leader of opposition himself agreed. It's not a debate about monarchs versus democracies. You can give me all this top-down approach and say we got Obamacare. Yeah, I'll say we got Brexit, we got Donald Trump, we got Osborne, right? We just cannot have a debate. I cannot contest with the separation of powers. What this debate is really about is about the narrative. Irregardless of whether a liberal democracy is good or not, whether us actively glorifying this as the best for system is one that is one that is beneficial for people living in these democracies, or B, whether it is preferable that we go on with this narrative. So firstly, what is the standard of the debate? I think the standard is pretty simple. Where can we just best approach the issues present within liberal democracies? And B, where are countries just more likely to be open to some version of reform, or just somewhat becoming better? So what does the world look like in the world of closing opposition? There is no glorification or preference of a system. So what does this mean? You don't glorify a liberal democracy, you don't prefer it, you just live in it. There is no inherent value in living in a liberal democracy. There is no inherent harm in living in a communistic country. I think this is the most reasonable. Look, I recognize this is a knife to opening government. Opening opposition has not had a chance to engage with this, so I will accept a free flow of POIs from them to compensate from this. Closing opposition, do it for my way, you can have a chance there. So first of all, let me just talk about this. All of my responses will be integrated. Problems do not exist within these systems. For example, in the United States, you have voter suppression. In the United Kingdom, you have high levels of poverty that are affecting people. But the problem is, because you have come to the decision that this is the best one, you come to a contrast. Yes, there are problems in a liberal democracy, but it could always be worse. If you are poor now, you will be poorer in a world where socialism is in power. If you are being discriminated against in Sweden, it will always be worse in America. What is a parallel to this? It's the parallel as to how we want to approach reforming capitalism in 2018. Every time we try to introduce regulation, every time we try to talk about healthcare, actional decision. You actively agree all of these things exist, but they are worth it. You have freedom of speech that comes in a liberal democracy, but it actively comes with minorities having to face groups with the KKK. It is not inherent to a liberal democracy, I agree, but this is just a byproduct of freedom of speech. People can express their racist views, people can express their sexist views, but the transactional decision made here is that that is worth it. All that suffering is worthwhile because we live in a preferable system to everything else. That's why you are just never able to have constructive criticism. So what is that then? then you also have to defend a system that would actively create that one. The reason as to why we're okay with invading Yemen or overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi was because of the potential end goal of creating a better and more preferable system. That is why this narrative works, and that's why it's harmful in the world of closing in opening opposites. Sorry, I'm losing my flow. Before I move in, yes, you guys got any questions? No, not yet. No. Okay. All right. Thanks. Write it a bit faster. Yeah. So, firstly, how does this then hurt development across countries? So you have to understand. Later. I'm really sorry. So how does it? But every time you try to contrast these systems, governments have to defend themselves. They have to defend being communistic. They have to defend not representing freedom of speech. The problem then is that it becomes a rat race between proving whose system is more preferable. In a world where you just did not ascribe an inherent value, maybe countries would be more open to freedom of speech. Maybe countries would be more open to reform because there is no inherent value or cultural significance to a system of governance. I know it's before 6 and yeah, sure.
If every system is equal, what's the incentive for countries? Countries can hijack the narrative is equal by saying that we will have to change or we end reforms. Our autonomous government is just as good as any system.
Yeah, the fact is it's neutral. No country can spread it, and no country will be like, yeah, this is inherently Western, so therefore I shouldn't adopt it. Next one. So move on. So the last thing, and here's the conclusion that comes from closing government. Here are the two things that we have unique ownership over. Firstly, this debate is not about whether democracy is preferable or whether an authoritarian one is preferable. That's just unreasonable. We cannot have a debate. It's about the narrative. The spread of the narrative comes with actively trading off the problems associated with the liberal democracy. Because you have come to the conclusion that this is the best potential one, any problems that come with this is a price that you have to pay for living in a better system. But number two, the problem of labeling it as the most preferable is that it forces countries with alternate forms of governance to actively defend their stances. So they don't adopt reforms that they would have otherwise done because it's just actively eroding their own value. For those reasons, side with closing government.
Ladies and gentlemen, this debate does not need the benefit. I'm going to prove to you in this debate, right? So the crux of the debate is that what are the effects that narrative creates, right? So this is where we're going to engage with CG. So we in CO, our extension is going to show how we achieve whatever benefits they want through this narrative, right? So what we're going to do to extend this debate. So firstly, we're going to take what does a narrative create, and secondly, how does this narrative create positive change that we want to get at the end of the day, right? So the only thing that doesn't really fit in my arguments that responses directly to CG is regarding the aspect of minorities, right? How in their situations that minorities often think that, I don't really have a voice, that freedom of speech means that I will somehow be, the freedom of speech almost always makes it seem like minorities are going to get the blunt of the hate speech, right? But under their side of the house, if let's say you want to argue that this happens in a state that's not liberally democratic, minorities still exist, then they will move down. So let's just talk about what exactly a narrative creates. So the narrative, especially in this context, makes that citizens demand for certain rights, right? So as much they demanded before, what they said before, like, that you have this human rights, basic human rights, you have this idea of voting, of choosing a government, right? So these are what citizens want for, right? And this narrative that glorifies liberal democracies more likely push for citizens to demand for this, right? So in a world without a narrative, citizens will not have the desire to create a change, right? They will more likely be in a situation where they accept that monarchy is ruling them. This is the fate that I live in, therefore I should just accept whatever is happening, right? So they already proved to you the benefits. I'm not really going to go into the benefits, but their benefits basically just on us proving that narrative will somehow get its benefits, right? So the narrative in two stages, right? So firstly, in a already democratic stage, how exactly does narrative push you even further, right? So we take a look at even on two contexts. First, let's look at Malaysia, for example, right? So in Malaysia, because of this narrative that liberal democracy exists, you always push your structures to improve, right, to become better. For example, why PH pushed for 2-year limit? Why they pushed for certain policies within government, right? Why you want the judiciary committee to be elected in a different way? Why you want legislative bodies to operate differently? Because you have this idea of what liberal democracy looks like, what is perfect world looks like, is separation of powers. You believe when you're not separated enough, it created this abuse of power, right? It created the IMDP. So you link the problem here because of this lack of the structural as well. Therefore, you want to push for it. That's why you want to create change, right? So this particular narrative, what happens is that it pushes for citizens to create positive changes even within a democratic structure, right? Even in the US, right? You don't argue that US is already probably the highest level of liberal democracy. Even in the US, the principles of LD are always there, right? People do not want to offend this particular main thing that there has to be separation. Each power balances each other out, right? A president cannot do this because if a president does this, somehow he will be impeached. He will do this because he has breached this particular narrative, right? So this is where it's important in this debate, right? Because of this particular narrative, even democratic countries will always have to adhere to this particular principle that there is this perfect system out there. In order to achieve this perfect system, I will have to do certain things, right? Because of this narrative. But under their world, when you do not necessarily glorify this perfect system, and you are adequate with whatever system you have, you don't necessarily push for whatever, when you have a problem, you don't necessarily push for changes in order to achieve this particular outcome. You want to stay in your particular bubble. You say, you know what, we just have to change the way we do this. We don't necessarily have to change the structure of the thing because there's no perfect system out there. So this also relates to my second point, right? So how exactly, and this engages what CD said, right? So this second situation is countries that are not democratic to begin with. Now let's look at theological states, monarchy states. View, right? So we concede that the narrative creates a situation in which even if, let's say, the states you want to argue are already happy, it makes them seem like they're not happy, right? Because they do not have these rights, right? So this is the reason why, so even with that, we are still considering that our side still have benefits. So even if, let's say, they are happy, we would like them to think they're not happy because they can push for certain changes. Why? Because people sometimes are not necessarily informed of what's best for them, right? For example, in North Korea, certain people worship him as a god because they do not know what exactly is out there, right? So only when you push this narrative in North Korea, for example, that, you have to chase for this perfect system. Only when you chase this perfect system can you live happier. So you live happier, you probably get this kind of benefits. So you push this narrative among this. Then government can only stay in power and citizens stay silent and stay oppressed. But you keep pushing people to fight against your governments, push people to demand changes from government, that's when you get better government. So at the end of the day, even if they want to argue that liberal democracy is not perfect, at least in a state like North Korea, when you push for some idea of democracy, some idea that you can get certain basic rights, we believe that citizens are happier than, and we win that side of the debate, right? So this is the reason why revolutions exist. So they ask us to defend the idea of invasion and all these things that happen with this thing, and we're defending it. We are okay with the fact that if, let's say, a revolution should happen and people were to get hurt, we are okay with this particular situation. Why? Because at the end of the day, when the revolution happens, you still create a positive outcome. Right? Yes, people die, people may get hurt in the process, but in the long run, governments will still have to cater and tender over before 6 years.
Yeah. All right. So the motion is about liberal democracy. If it's just about democracy, you'll just say democracy, right? And secondly, if you do agree to the principle of freedom of speech, and we say that liberals fundamental principle.
The entire idea of liberal democracy, I think they're out of the box. So the only one we're probably trying to engage with CG, I think OG is completely out. We are trying to differentiate ourselves from in a way we're showing where the narrative part is more important. So I think OG, I don't really want to engage, I want to finish my point. So the idea of revolution, right? So why revolutions exist? Because people want to push for changes, right? And this change, people default in order to inflict changes because they have this idea at the end of the day, you will achieve this particular goal, you will achieve this particular liberal democracy. So without a narrative, you will not be able to push for revolution. So you want to argue that revolution is bad, you have to show me why revolution is bad, right? But revolution is good. Why? That's why Gaddafi fell down, right? Because you wanted to revolt against him. You believe that you should deserve better rights in your world. You believe you should be given more access to whatever things that Gaddafi had. Yes, even if US entered, even in Afghanistan when US invaded, people will be suppressed by Al-Qaeda, people will be suppressed by this patriarchal society. When US invaded, people wanted this to some extent because they wanted the ability to come out from this life, right? They wanted to achieve certain things
All four speakers coming up from side government itself, up until the end, they condemn on how democracy is fueled, right? They condemn on how democracy is bad and on. But to a point of time, until the end, the speaker, no alternative has been especially harmful. And we talked, I will tell you about how, especially from closing, right? Just to bend around and saying that, you know, we, instead of no alternative, we don't want any alternatives, but cherry picking the good things that are slowly coming up. And I think that's not unfair in the very end system. Before moving on to about the speech, let me see what opening government has contributed to the debate by some right? As the duty of the whip, that's them being boxed out in the early stage. But nevertheless, moving on, right? They brought to you two things. Number one, they said to you, like, you know, how this really happened within America by itself and does not happen naturally in other countries. And it's best within America. We think, yeah, it's true to a certain kind of extent that we don't deny that for it. But nonetheless, if you're trying to support minority, you're trying to give them the form of support they need in the very things, right? We think this is where liberal democracy takes place here, right? Because if you yourself came and told, like, you know how, like, right now, you have the ability to condemn them within this particular state. Really, that form of like ability also happens when you can go out and say what are exactly your rights to actually go about and protect yourself in the very first place. Right? The inability for you to progress those rights is what we think is much more harmful for this particular minority, and this is where they don't have whatever tools they need to progress in a very state, right? Articulated system. But second here, we think that right now, in a progression, when progression is supposed to happen, the narrative of having a liberal democracy serves best the interest of minority and also majority, rather than having nothing at all to begin with. Right? Besides that, nothing coming out from opening government by itself. But let's move on. Let's move on what CG talked about. This one we think they try to, like, you know, bend over and how the motion is supposed to be. So coming up particularly from the member of GovOp here. They said, you know how right now, the problem is here is we are labeling it wrongly. The problem with labeling it liberal democracy, we choose to subscribe to that notion only, right? So when you subscribe to the notion, you have to ban and you have to hit the system what liberal democracy essentially means, right? We tell you that liberal democracy in its very essence is very flexible, right? If you subscribe to one particular notion, you can do that, right? This is why we think the check and balance within democracy itself leaves you the room to operate. If you don't subscribe to this kind of system, you can, like, you know, exclude these kind of policies, you can take up this kind of policies. So we think that right now, this system is really flexible to begin with. Right? In a comparison of what they brought to you, right? They do not provide you a system on how it's going to be maneuvered in the very first place. Who's going to be taking the decision? No form whatsoever. Even if someone was to take the decision, who are they going to appease? Who are going to appeal to? No form of check to balance. This is how we think it's particularly harmful and should be penalized heavily. Coming up later, coming up from their side. Right? But nevertheless, right, moving on, right, and decision-making part, right, this is how we think that as first time the speech came about, right, now we think that right now, once you understand what exactly the narrative is, you can always prove to them or how you can do it better, right? This is the thing that right now, under their part of the world, right, in the comparative on their part of the world, they don't exactly know what type of rights, what type of ability that they have, because they don't have a system or whatever the inability and ignorance to a system or not knowing what exactly you are gives you the inability to loop over there. Right? You don't know exactly what are you doing, you don't know exactly what system are you doing. This is the thing in a country that's progressing towards securing rights within the minority by itself is very, very harmful to begin with, right? Moving on, yes.
Yeah, we also told you that the most desirable narrative will likely lead to no compromisation, or you don't question your own model of government. Why should there be no compromising or questioning about the liberal democracy?
This is everything I know. The fact of questioning your very own democracy happens only when you know what to question, the ability to know that you can actually question. Under their paradigm, they do. To begin with. So we think right now, when you don't know what a system, am I like conservative government that cannot question the authoritarian government? Am I like in a system whereby, so we think that right now, the inability for you to know what type of system you're attached to is why we think it's harmful. You do not know what is the maximum output of your rights that you're given with in the liberty by itself, right? This is why we think that right now, the ignorance here plays a very major role in understanding how the government should take about in their very stance. So this is where we think our paradigm serves the minority better, right? Knowing that now your rights is being suppressed, knowing that now, right now, you're not given the maximum output of what you're supposed to get. So we think under our paradigm, the ability to question the decision taken by the government itself serves this minority towards a better place to begin with. They might say, yes, you open up to hate speeches, you open up to defending KKK, to a certain instance that's true. But look at how these people in the minority group has been called out for in the very first place. And this proper check and balance only happens under our side of the paradigm in comparison our first response to that, yes, if they think that liberal democracy is going to serve them better, why not? At the expense of people changing the government in its very sense, right? That's number one. But number two, right? I'll take it for 6. But number two, right? This is within the right now. The fact that you are able to revolutionize states that have been suppressed in the very first place happens under our side vector, right? If this comes under the narrative that you are being forced to actually take up liberal democracy, we don't mind. But look at the output of what is really achieved in the very first place. You throw out dictators, you start a revolution, you create a space whereby people can actually make a change knowing the right side. This is what we think that right now, in a comparison, people are much more better off doing the rights under our side in comparison of not knowing anything at all, not knowing what kind of system they live in. We think we are better. But before 6, yes.
So if liberal democracies are as flexible as you suggest they are, why would they revolutionize towards this linear model that you seem to be positing? Maybe why would they just label it as a democracy but not really be it?
The labeling part of the system is not something that we are focusing on today, right? You know what they on their side, what they're trying to do is that, you know what, not labeling at all, but choosing to choose, like cherry picking this part of the system without labeling. So we think that right now the ignorance over there plays a major fatality on how you decide where the government goes about, right? But looking at the debate and what they expect, right? Number one, many of you talked about like how like the minority here is one of the biggest stakeholders to begin with, right? Yes, we believe it's true. In order to progress forward this group of people, we think it's better off if they have a choice, they have a right to progress forward with them. And this kind of form of choice and right happens better under our side, knowing that they have a choice. They have to know that they have a choice to begin with in the very first place. Right? On a comparison basis, if you honest look at it, who better off know that they have a choice? Under their side, not knowing what kind of system they subscribe to begin with, like you don't know who made the choice, like how do you speak out in the very first place is why we think you are progressing within the minority itself. With that, go inside closing up.
Thank you for all the teams. Thank you for the debate. Invite the teams, pass applause, shake hands.